All right, so we're going to talk about America Chavez. So this is really interesting because this comes down to pay disputes and stuff like this, and how it's different when you work for when books are adapted for the screen. The writer has some say in like what they're going to get because they negotiated a contract with the publishing house. But most of these comic creators, they're paid to create characters for the publisher, right? So if you work for Marvel or DC, you don't own the characters you create. They own the character. You're paid most of them are paid page rates for how they get that done. So this is an article. It says America Chavez, co-creator, declines Marvel's insult of an offer for Doctor Strange 2. So this is, I think somebody saying late stage capitalism or something like that. Writer Joe Casey, who says he was offered a pittance ahead of his character's big screen debut, is speaking out in hopes that he could help other creators. There are still systemic flaws in the way that creators are neither respected nor rewarded. This is going to be an ongoing debate that will happen now that, with comic books being as big as they are in the adaptation world. My favorite being an example of this, not in film, but is I think that Joe Shuster and was paid like $130 for the rights to Superman.
Yeah, in 1938.
In
I don't know what that is in modern dollars.
But even with inflation,
still not even.
Not much.
It's not like when you really think about it, and like one of the reasons that they if I'm understanding correctly, that they changed like Spider-Man into other versions, or they changed Superman into Jonathan Kent rather than it's literally for it's financial. It has nothing to do with it's got to do with copyright and trademark laws. So like one of the reasons why they don't use, from what I understand, Truth, Justice in the American Way anymore is because it's tied to that version of the character, so it's money related more than anything else. And now it's like I love the new slogan. It's like Truth, Justice, and a Better Tomorrow, which is like, it just sounds like an ad for like an insurance company or like some type of corporate office. Like it's a company you have
like an allergy medicine.
Yeah, like
perfect.
And a better like you got your first job out of college at like an ad agency, and that's like their pitch. Like we're making a better tomorrow. Like it doesn't feel like a real thing. So it says when director Sam Raimi's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness arrives in theaters May 5th, audiences will meet America Chavez, the Marvel comic book character brought to life by young actor Xochitl Gomez. I had to look that up before, I didn't know how to pronounce Xochitl. I remember when I was on IRL, Tim pronounced it like that. I'm like, huh? I didn't know how to pronounce it, but it's Xochitl Gomez. And she, by the way, in my opinion, actually looks fairly charismatic in the role, so I think she could do a good job. She does not have a ton of credits behind her. Ahead of its release, the Fan Favorite Heroes edition, flag on the play. There is no such thing as fan favorite in America Chavez in the same sentence. That is a lie. That is pure propaganda on this article site. Nobody actually likes America Chavez. It doesn't mean that the adaptation couldn't be good, but nobody likes America Chavez. Nobody likes Kamala Khan. Nobody likes Riri Williams. These are just myths drawn up by these industries. The film will also acknowledge that the character... So she is it's seen as a win for representation, as she is a rare Latina superhero in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The film will also acknowledge that the character is gay, because what matters in the world now are your immutable characteristics and your sexual orientation. That is what really makes things great in the world today.
Gotta check the boxes.
I'm being very serious right now.
It's interesting though, because she was written in 2011,
and now
that's before everything kind of blew up like that.
And he's realistically, if we're talking about the modern comic book industry, he's not allowed to write characters like that anymore, because you can't have like a straight white dude writing a Latina character that would be...
You don't get her perspective as a young Latina gay woman.
He could, even though he created the character, he couldn't understand her struggle.
Yes.
Because that's the world we live in now, where you literally are not allowed to write anything. My favorite, it's like I listen to a lot of comics are not something that I have the money or the time or the inclination to collect anymore, because the industry has let me down so many times throughout the years, but I still keep up with the industry, and they talk a lot about it. It's like they literally brought back segregation. These people, like, you can't write characters unless you have those exact characteristics in certain cases. So, but his issue here is with pay. Basically, he's saying like he created this character, and he's mentioned in other interviews that he goes out of his way not to create characters for these big publishing houses for that reason, because there's no upside to it. Yeah. So he says, for comic book writer Joe Casey, seeing Chavez soar to new heights is bittersweet. Casey is proud of his work on America Chavez and what she represents. Yet, like many comic book writers before him, Casey feels a tinge of regret, watching his creation take off without him being meaningfully compensated for it. I mean,
he has to recognize that these were the terms he agreed to, but at the same time, there's the problem that they're not incentivized to be creative if they know that they are not going to be compensated properly for it in the future.
But one of the counter argument to that is like now, when every character is designed as like a Netflix pitch, the creativity goes out the window because like the budget won't be there won't be a budget to allow us an intergalactic space battle, so we'll have them sitting at a diner eating, because that's what people want. People want the world's mightiest, most powerful heroes to sit in a diner and talk about paprika or something stupid like that. Like nobody wants that, but they love that stuff. One, because they all loved Joss Whedon and J.J. Abrams stuff growing up, and two, because they know that when you pitch that, it will work as like the producer of that TV show that you want it to be turned into, will be like, can easily see this becoming a TV show. But for somebody like this, you're right. Like it's they're not incentivized to do that, but that's the contract that they signed for. And the problem is if you don't have, like in an industry, like it depends on how valuable your skill set is. And that's hard in the arts. Like if we're talking, like we talked about unions the other day, if you're in a skilled labor set that requires certifications and schooling, that's a lot different than office staff unions, which they can just fire you and replace with anyone, right? How do you gauge a comic writer's value, because it is a uniquely specialized skill, but also do they really have any bargaining power in an industry where page rates haven't changed much over the years and they can just bring in someone new who will do it for the same amount? So he wants to get paid more money, and it's DC is apparently better at this than Marvel. Like Ethan Van Sciver has mentioned on streams, like he gets, like, even though DC fired him because of his political leanings, or they claim that that's not what it was for, but that he still gets checks for characters he's created because he's created very big name Green Lantern, stuff like that, like very big name characters that end up on the screen. He gets fairly decent sized money every time they're adapted to screen. So it says, now Casey speaks out for the first time about his compensation. He is cautious not to sound aggrieved. Well, yes, we're in the age of grievance. He should be sounding more aggrieved.
Lay it on thick.
Lay it on thick. Well, they would be like, it's, you cannot, if you're not even, if you like, they're not going to take his problems as real because he's a cishet white man. Yeah. How could he understand struggle? Now, as Casey speaks out for the first time about his compensation, he's cautious not to sound aggrieved. The writer says he hopes he hopes going public will help other creators receive better terms when the work is turned into films and streaming and action figures. You have that's not. This won't do that. They have to actually negotiate.
Yeah, you don't receive those terms.
They're not going to. Marvel's not going to look at this and be like, "Oh no, what are we going to do?" He wrote that. Like, their pieces like this have existed forever. They're going to keep doing what they're doing until these people have the balls to actually tell them, "Look, I'm not going to work for less than this money, and I want this much if I create this character." And they're just not going to do that.
Yeah, like, that's a nonsense justification for whining. I mean,
says the fact. It's funny how in his first sentence he kind of like explains why he's wrong, kind of. He says, the fact is Marvel owns America Chavez. That's not in dispute on any level, but there are still systematic flaws in the way that creators are neither respected nor rewarded, Casey tells The Hollywood Reporter. Marvel Publishing declined to comment. Of course they did, because they can just wait this out and the Marvel stans will continue loving everything Marvel does, and this will fall by the wayside. It says, during his time at Marvel, Casey never signed any paperwork regarding the character, though he understood Marvel owned everything he created. He's literally making his own argument as to why this is a nonsense article. And maybe it draws more awareness to the problem, but as we know in these industries, that doesn't mean change is actually going to happen. It says Casey's work at Marvel dates back to the 90s, which credits include titles starring like the X-Men, Hulk, Iron Man, the Avengers, all the characters you've actually heard of. He did not create those characters. They're just saying he's worked on the biggest publishers. Several years ago, when Casey learned Marvel intended to include America Chavez in the Doctor Strange sequel, he contacted the publishers to request paperwork that would also cover her previous appearances in animated TV series, episodes, and games. The problem is they work on page rate. So if they get the inspiration to create a character, what are you going to drop a new contract every time you do that? Not likely. And they're just going to tell you to swap it out for this character that already exists. There's no incentive for the studio to give him more money. Not really. I don't think that the new like all those characters that I mentioned earlier, your Kamala Khans, your Riri Williams, your America Chavez's, are not popular in comparison to a Tony Stark, Iron Man, to a Captain America, even to a Bucky as the Winter Soldier. All those characters are far better known and far more liked. They're just going to want you to go back to those which you have no claim to.
The popularity of his character is being inflated artificially. It's not like he changed the game for them in any way.
You'll get thousands of articles that say like America Chavez is the most popular character, like, and everyone's just like, who?
Yeah, according to who?
Like who? Like who? Comicbook.com. Like, okay, the ones that are all like arms of Disney. And like live on the fact that they get promo material, and so their ability to review accurately or to review on schedule requires them to have a good relationship with these companies, which is extremely incestuous. And you can't actually expect honest reviews when all of them are just promotional arms for these movie studios. In recent years, creator Jim Starlin went public with his pay grievances and ultimately received a better deal from Marvel for the use of the villain Thanos. Yeah, that was a big one when the Infinity War saga was in the middle of it, and they were talking about how he wasn't making almost anything. So I don't see this actually leading to anything. But do you think they should be just more steadfast and try to negotiate better contracts? Would you put this on them?
Well, of course. Yeah. Well, I mean, the more I read into this article, the worse it gets. He says. For me, it's not about money. Okay. It's not even about the respect. Okay, so what's it about? Listen, I would never expect to be respected by a corporation.
And he's right. He's right about that.
That's true.
Anytime people talk about these things, it's like you cannot expect a corporation to act like a real person. It's not.
Right. So he's just saying, I'm a happy guy. I'm not disgruntled. I'm not bitter. This is how you change things, by talking about it. Like what is he? I don't know.
This to look like he's fighting for other people.
You change things by negotiating a better contract.
Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Like he's standing on he's like theoretically standing on principle, but standing on principle would be to not do the work at all without a new contract,
right.
And then walking if they don't give you what you want.
Maybe he's just saying, "Don't do what I did."
Is
that the point?
I could respect it if he said that.
Yes,
that's a fair thing to say.
I thought it was funny. They want to pay him cash to go to premieres. That's a little bit of a sellout move.
Yes. What's funny about this is also this is proof that we're really in an age where crowdfunding and independent creation is the way to go. You own the rights to your own characters. It's a lot more work, but the reward is often will far outstrip the page rates that you're making for these things. We talked about Brandon Sanderson's book deal. He just made $23 million on Kickstarter for his fantasy series that he just kickstarted. But I mean, it's a ton of work. He's going to have to do it all on his own. But the beauty of something like that or Chris Stuckman is making a horror movie, and it's like the most funded horror movie on Kickstarter in history. There's a lot of cases in which your Comics Matter channel or your Ethan Van Skivers, all of these people who have created very successful Kickstarter campaigns for comics have found their niche, and it's a lot of work, but at least they own the rights to their characters and they can do with it what they want.
That's the trade-off that you make.
Where you go. Like if you want to make more money, you could theoretically do that, but you're going to have to work a hell of a lot harder.
He doesn't want more money, Brett. He doesn't want respect. He's not bitter. He's not angry. He's a happy guy.
He's just making this article cuts.
He just kind of
What do you want?
He's just a little uncomfortable, and he wants to try his activist hat because the artist hat and the negotiating skills just didn't quite work out for him. So let's try activism for a minute and see, does that work? Maybe. I don't know.
That's what he's working on.
Yeah.
There's this, I remembered this one. It says, David Aja, I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. He says, wants Marvel to stop crediting and start paying for comic book adaptations. I remember this one when the show Hawkeye came out. One of the pieces of art looked familiar to me. It says, despite his and writer Matt Fraction's, for better or worse, popular run of the character, they're talking about Hawkeye, serving as direct inspiration for the show's aesthetics, straight down to one of the covers being recruited for the Disney Plus series marketing material, artist David Aja wants Marvel to stop crediting and start paying. And basically it says the lack of pay for Hawkeye on October 24th in a discussion where he looking at the promotional poster, which is based directly off his art, right? He noted that they recreated it for the show. And when I was looking at it, I was like, it looks familiar to me, but I couldn't quite place it, which is why this article was really funny to me. But he says, in response, a fan declared that the official poster paying homage to the Matt Fraction comics is the coolest thing ever. DC Comics artist Bruno Redondo pushed back, stop crediting just writers, mostly when the visual tribute is just as important, meaning like the writers get all the credit, but the artists don't. So these issues permeate this industry, and there has not been, we could talk YA where the last great contract was probably J.K. Rowling, who owns like everything with Harry Potter, but now the publishers won't even agree to contracts like that because they want they want to own as much of that character as possible when they find the next big art, I guess the next big, what would be Twilight or Harry Potter or something like that. So these things will go on, and I think the only answer is to just create stuff yourself. Make your own stuff, and then you don't have to worry about dealing with Disney and the corporate arm of your supposedly creative ventures. I say go be creative on your own terms. Do the extra work, but reap the extra rewards.
It's too late for situations like this.
Yes.
They're just going to keep complaining.
Sure.
And these characters are, like I said, America Chavez is not the most culturally relevant character in the world, but we'll see how that happens. I'm interested to see how this one comes out. Oh, I did find the comments were on this one. I only pulled up this article for the comments because there was a couple of it says, America Chavez is in no way a fan favorite. It is a character that is widely disliked by comic book fans. She made some short-lived guest appearances in a few comics. Those appearances never ran long. Her solo book was disliked by most and barely made it the year mark before being canceled. I've heard, from what I understand, the first run is quite well liked, but then everything after that got worse and worse. Same with Riri Williams, same with Kamala Khan. Nobody likes Miss Marvel at all. So it says, it's the same in any sector. You work for a company, they own the rights to whatever you invent, create, or improve. I mean, that's standard when you sign a contract for a job, that anything you create there is the property of that company.
Doesn't that precedence run back to Disney?
Yes.
Wasn't he kind of like the first guy that monopolized all of those? Because like Earworks was the guy that did a lot of the animation. I think his brother, I forget Walt's brother's name, but he did a lot of the work. But I think that he kind of laid the groundwork for how that goes. It all goes under the Disney logo, and whatever people create while they're working for him. I mean, it's Disney. Mickey Mouse is Disney.
Disney. I guess the trademark is coming up again for and they'll lobby and keep it like always. I think that's me and somebody who works here were a while back were talking about that. Like Disney's like Mickey's coming up for trademark, and I was like, nah. This happens every time, and they always end up keeping the rights to it.
Of course,
count on it. They lobby to keep the rights for those characters. So, just interesting to see how the business side of things, like artists, like I would be horrible at doing like what he has to do. I would be horrible at negotiating a contract. So I understand his pain. Like you don't want to be, if you don't know your worth, depending on like if you created the character. I mean, he's been around since the 90s, but if you're creating something and you don't really understand what your worth or your time is worth, and you're not willing to stringently stick by the values of that, that's a big argument with, I hate to get into this, the wage gap is that men are more, a percentage of that comes from men are just more willing to be adversarial in contract negotiations. They're willing to walk if they're not offered the right amount of money. In this case, maybe they should just walk if they don't think that they're getting, and maybe it's because the practices have been the same for so long. It's hard to make that change, to be that first person who's like, I'm not going to do this because they view working in the industry as more important than the financial aspect for their future. So they're not willing to be the one that rocks the boat to start the wave that makes changes.
I'd also bet that creative types are worse at advocating for themselves.
Yes.
Oh,
absolutely.
sure. Yeah.
They're more introspective and don't really understand the legal agreements they're reading.
Like I said, I'd be horrible at they should have lawyers reviewing these contracts. But
then you need a good lawyer. You need a lawyer you can trust. And I mean,
not some guy out of the phone book.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's a legitimate tough situation that people like him are in. It's just like maybe have these conversations in private instead of trying to masquerade as a late to the party activist.
I think now I just have a story idea where he finds his lawyer because he penciled like art for like a lawyer in like a Yellow Pages thing back in the day, and it's the only lawyer he knows because he wrote the number like 5,000 times in the art.
I like that. That's funny.
We should do that. Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.
Bye.